There are a million videos just like this one on YouTube already, I know. But I still really wanted to share my thoughts because I thought that they might be worth talking about. My experience when it comes to switching to only Apple products for basically the better part of a whole year. Now, there were exceptions, obviously, like when it came to live streaming, I would only go straight to my Windows PC. There were times where I just couldn't exclusively stay Apple. But for the most part, when I was on the go, I really was just Apple. For instance, over here, I've actually got an Apple Watch. I've got... Shut up. Well, this one is actually last gen's Apple Watch. It's not the current gen one. And I also use an iPhone 12 actually for quite a while. I went ahead and I used an iPad Pro for actually even longer than the year, technically. Like going along those lines. I used AirPods as well very often. And not to mention that I ended up going with a MacBook Air at first. I was using that for a little while, and then I eventually managed to get the 2016 MacBook Pro. But anyway, that's... maybe I'm getting too specific too soon. But anyway, I'm someone who works and games on Windows, and I tend to prefer Android over iOS. And while I didn't really expect any of this to be torture, it certainly wasn't the wonderland that some might describe it as. So let's go ahead and dive into what I thought about switching over for an entire year. I will be completely honest about it here too. I have no intentions of sensationalizing anything really. So as I said earlier, I stuck with these products for the better part of a year, and some for even longer, even because I love the experience from the very beginning of using said item. Now, I am approaching this video with my own bias, since it's all based off of my own experience and how I felt about the switch for this long. I will also talk about which I decided to stay with after I mostly switched back to my previous workflow. So let's dive right into the actual content here. And before we continue, don't forget to follow me on both Twitch and on Instagram. I will be streaming on Twitch fairly often, so I really don't want you to miss out on that. Also, why not go ahead and pledge over to the Patreon if you would like to support us? There are going to be monthly giveaways for members as a way of giving back. And then lastly, now do make sure to join the Discord because there are plenty of cool people over there. And subscribe, like this video, of course, for the usual if you end up liking it. Now on to the video. So let's begin with my time with the iPad Pro. So this is the 2021 12.9-inch M1 iPad Pro that does have a keyboard case from Bridge. Now before this, I actually had a 2018 11-inch iPad Pro, so I have been using the iPad for longer than the title of this video suggests. I used to carry my Razer Blade 14 2015 with me on the go whenever I needed to do edits or work on animation projects or anything like that. While the hardware on that laptop is certainly aged by now, the only thing that really bothers me about it is really just the battery life, since it only lasts about an hour or two at this point, and the fans also get extremely loud on that laptop. It has been notorious for that since day one, essentially. So I needed a different solution and went to the 2018 iPad Pro. Then I switched over to the 2021 iPad Pro. I really don't regret this decision one bit because the iPad Pro is ridiculously powerful. I use Procreate and even Clip Studio sometimes to work on animations. The Apple Pencil is a fantastic performer here since I get some serious work done, and even back in my college days, this really helped me a lot when it came to getting work done during my commute. Now that is specifically regarding to the 2018 model since I graduated last year in 2020. So this tablet also has great battery life, by the way, which made forgetting to charge it overnight mostly a non-issue, but this is mostly a thing with the 2021 M1 model. Now, for video editing, I did stick with LumaFusion, of course, and that is a piece of software that is incredible for the mobile experience. I can edit 4K footage and add my transitions, text, and so much more without any kind of issues. However, I do wish that it did have a stabilizer built in. That has been pretty much my laptop replacement for a while, but not entirely because of the awful trackpad experience actually with the iPad Pro. I used to have the Magic Keyboard case from Apple for this tablet, so I did actually delve into using first-party accessories, but I ended up returning it because it was very expensive and the trackpad was genuinely seldom used. I would use it for scrolling around, but it was pointless for pointing and for actually like just
clicking on things and doing more trackpad things. However, while the surface of the trackpad was never really an issue, in fact, we always got great glass trackpads that felt very nice. The cursor is a giant dot, even at its smallest size, and I still have no idea. I still have not figured out whatsoever how to make it so that the cursor doesn't just immediately click on something or trigger something when it's hovering over something. I would rather just click on something normally, as I would normally do on a computer. So that I found extremely weird, and it still bothers me to this day. I've been using an iPad Pro for the better part of 2 years. Now, that aspect of the iPad Pro is still much less than ideal, and I sincerely hope that Apple gives us a regular cursor for goodness sakes. But I have loved everything else about this machine, and I genuinely think that I made the right choice going in this direction with the iPad Pro. Next was my switch from the Pixel 4 to the iPhone 12. Now, this one actually technically wasn't really by choice, because I got cold feet after seeing that the back panel on the Pixel 4 was starting to pop off from the main body, and I had the iPhone 12 already, courtesy of Wondershare, from back when I made videos for them, and I ended up sticking to the iPhone 12 from there. This iPhone is the best looking one since the iPhone SE from 2016, and it's boxier, easier to hold, and does look very nice. Now, the camera on this phone was definitely better than the one on the Pixel 4, at least in my opinion, since I still think that Google blew it with the Pixel 4 back then. But the iPhone 12 just has a great camera for both the front and the rear set. Also, the display is gorgeous and reproduces beautiful colors that made watching content on it just a fantastic experience. Another thing that I absolutely loved about this phone was also its CarPlay functionality, which I know that it's definitely not really something that everyone here will even care for, but it gave me consistently great performance when using it with my car as a GPS navigator and for Spotify. Siri was also incredibly responsive the entire time, and she sounded clear as day through my car speakers versus how it was with my Pixel 6, which, yes, I did actually eventually ended up switching back to Pixel because the Google Assistant actually sounds horrible in my car speakers. I don't know why. I still have to look into that. However, Siri was actually great, and yes, I did actually go with South African Siri. I really like her accent. And she was great for hands-free, making phone calls and switching between songs and that kind of thing. But iOS was just one of those things that was less than stellar for me, because Apple has generally made improvements to iOS to make it more customizable. The icons are now, they're still too big, honestly, to really make the most out of widgets on a smaller device. And it does still retain a lot of that DNA, if not most, really, from previous versions of iOS, where there just wasn't much customization. The OS is still very boring to me. My iPhone still looked like everyone else's, so the magic of using the iPhone really faded away from me rather quickly, so I did stick with it until the Pixel 6 came out, and now that's essentially my daily driver. But people definitely noticed right away when I switched over to the green bubbles, which was actually pretty hilarious. They immediately noticed when my bubbles were blue, and then when I switched back to Android, I actually had a friend in particular who was like, I'm noticing that your bubbles are green again. Why? So that was actually kind of funny. But the iPhone 12, fantastic device. Not for me, though. I'd rather stick with Android. Now, when it comes to the audio side, I actually switched from my Razer Hammerhead True Wireless Pro to AirPods, just regular AirPods, not the Pros, and I was mostly fine with the experience here. These connected instantaneously with my iPhone 12, and like I've said in the past, these have a decent soundstage and decent clarity for music, so I did enjoy using AirPods. I also happen to find the shape of these AirPods to be the most comfortable in my ears. I find them to be more comfortable, actually, than AirPods Pro. But that's just me. So I was one of those bags that always had both AirPods at all times, and it felt nice to be in their shoes. But jokes aside, using AirPods was pretty cool, but I didn't really see much utility for these after I switched back to Android. I kind of tried doing the same thing that I would do on the iOS with Android with my AirPods, but it just wasn't really the same. I felt like they weren't quite as responsive. They sounded the same, but they weren't quite as responsive, if that makes any sense. So had I stayed with the iPhone, I would have totally kept these. I ended up abandoning them, so I don't really want to knock them, as I genuinely did enjoy using them. And now, similarly to my iPad Pro switch, I also technically switched to using the MacBook Air for a little while while, and I wasn't really the biggest fan. I don't like macOS like the way that it looks. Like, I do like the way that it looks, but not really the way that it works. I've always found simple tasks on Windows to be more tedious to do on macOS, such as going between tabs on a single browser, clicking and dragging, and the like. macOS just feels more sluggish to me. That's because for these tasks, not only do they have additional animations, but the fantastic trackpad on most of these machines are actually rather annoying for doing things like clicking and dragging and things like that, because it just really got in the way. That low travel mechanism and the haptic feedbacks, I didn't really enjoy it when it came to precision. It just felt nice to use when you were like scrolling around with it, but when it comes to clicking and all, I've kind of gotten used to feeling just that slab of glass not moving and it just vibrating instead. Like, now it's super noticeable, and I don't know if I like it as much anymore. So not exactly a fan here, but when I ended up getting the 16-inch M1 MacBook Pro very recently to review, I very much enjoyed the additional screen real estate, and most importantly, the performance and software like DaVinci Resolve 17, which has been optimized to work with the M1 chip now, and Photoshop as well. I really enjoyed using this particular machine for doing work, and while macOS was still meh for me, it didn't really matter that much when I could get my work done so quickly and without hiccups on the go. So if I'm completely honest, this is probably one of the more mixed switches that I had, because I was consistently loving and hating every second that I spent with either the MacBook Air or the MacBook Pro. But ultimately, I decided to just leave both of these behind in favor of using my iPad Pro, since it's lighter and has the capability to edit the kind of videos that I need to make with great efficiency. So basically, I just ditched laptops entirely in favor of the iPad. Crazy world, huh? Then finally, my switch from no smartwatch using the Apple Watch. So this was actually a very interesting one without a doubt, because I actually never really liked using smartwatches. My first smartwatch was the first generation Apple Watch, which was a total battery hog, and honestly, it just wasn't worth the hassle for me, since I thought that it was uncomfortable for sending messages, making calls, and especially having to charge every single night. I liked it for the notifications and the size itself, but that's really about it. And then when I switched over to Android, I went over to the ZTE Quartz, which is actually pretty dated by now, and I would consider it to be a pretty bad smartwatch at this point. Yeah, I mean, I came across a lot of the same issues as the first-gen Apple Watch, plus it was way bigger, so it was more uncomfortable to deal with. So I stopped wearing smartwatches after that until I made the full-on switch again, and this time, the Apple Watch felt like an entirely different device. This became a very stealthy little watch that brought my alerts consistently over and could actually last days without needing to be charged all of the time. So it's no longer a burden if I only need to set it down to charge, even a few days apart instead of every single night. The screen also gets quite bright, and there are going to be some great watch faces too that do allow for some personality. Now, I still didn't really go further than that in terms of my usage, but I did use it to go between songs too. This was a much nicer experience than before, without a doubt, but I still didn't want to stick with it for longer than I had to be honest, because I still didn't really love using smartwatches all that much. It was a lot better, but I'm realizing that it's just not for me. Smartwatches to me are one of the most gimmicky pieces of tech in the market, because most of them aren't really all that practical. At least not practical enough to justify the cost, and it is difficult to make a smartwatch useful enough for me, at least. So we did have to go our separate ways. I am going to be giving this back since I don't really need it anymore. It's been more than a year. So ultimately, I somewhat saw the appeal of the ecosystem because everything works together pretty well. But I actually didn't really find this to be more convenient than just setting things up on my own, honestly. I'm pretty used to it, considering that I already come from the Windows side and the Android side. There just wasn't much in it for me, which surprised me, as I thought that, like with most things, I would have a change of heart about my initial bias about Apple's products. But it's just that I simply don't really enjoy the experience nearly in the same way that many others do. And that's totally okay. But I don't really think that I want to challenge myself like this ever again, since I didn't really need to step out of my comfort zone for this regardless. I just kind of thought that it would be a fun test, And I think that I stuck around with these products for maybe just a little bit too long. I've had enough of Apple for now, I suppose. The ecosystem is a powerful thing, though. Don't get me wrong. That does make the experience of going full Apple totally worth it. I have friends that would never go in a different direction, and I grew to understand why. So I am very glad to learn, or that I got to learn more about both sides. And well, that's really all that I needed to know at the end of the day or year. So thank you so much for sitting through this video. I know that this was a very long one. And again, I very much apologize to make you put up with my sick voice. I have not recovered quite yet, but I am almost there. My mom says that a few more Teraflus should fix that, so let's see if that's actually true. I make myself sound like I'm still a teenager when I say those things. But thank you so much for watching, and if you are interested in getting any of these products, if maybe any of these interested you, if I happen to sell you on an iPad Pro, then by all means, affiliate links to Amazon down below. Please make sure to use those if you are interested, or if you're just interested in getting this particular accessory as well, or maybe just any other keyboard covers that could be good for it. I'll see what I can leave down below. But I am going to be leaving a link directly to all of these products over to Best Buy / Narrative. They're both going to be one and the same. And this is actually going to be the best way for you to support this channel if you end up making a purchase with that link. That would really help out quite a lot. So I would appreciate that a lot. Even if you didn't end up going with any of these products, it's totally fine. If you use my link, you would really be helping a poor soul such as myself. I should really hide this watch so that I can sound more convincing about that. But either way, I would generally like to give a very special thanks to all of my patrons, including especially my tier 3s, which are going to be Joe Moss, Sara Wazel, and Omar. Thank you so much for all of your support, because it really does go a very long way. Now, on to the rest of the tier 2s coming right up.
And this is super important. I would just like to give a very special thanks to all of our patrons, which are going to be listed right here on the screen. Again, a massive thanks to you all for supporting us to help us create the kind of content that we bring to you on a day-to-day basis. And thank you so much for supporting the Tech Summit podcast as well. And just remember that if you would like to be a part of this community too, and then do make sure to check out the links to our Patreon, where you don't only get bonus episodes of our podcast, but you also get automatically entered into one of our monthly giveaways of a tech product that we have reviewed that is of at least $50 in value or higher. So links to that down below.
Now, don't forget to follow me both on Instagram and on Twitch, where I do stream fairly often. I've actually been streaming just a little bit more often lately, kind of just on like random nights, because I do miss interacting with you guys. And if any of you have any questions at all, if there's anything that you would like to talk to me about, Twitch is generally the best way to do it, or the best place to do it. But you could also stop by the Tech Summit Discord, links to that down below. So with that said, finally, enough rambling. I'm done, because this has been Francisco from Tech Summit. Thank you for watching, and I will be seeing you all later. Enjoy.